So I'm going to start, maybe depending on how everything goes. I had a video that I also wanted to show, so I'll come back to that. But in the meantime, you'll have to imagine things on the screen. Ascension consciousness. A question to ask yourself. When you don't have something you want, or when you feel there isn't enough money or time, or when something isn't going your way, how much time do you spend thinking or talking about it?
Too much.
And when things go right, and you have enough or what you want, how much time do you spend appreciating it? How is that balance in your life? And I say the balance in your life because what's happening in your mind is demonstrating in your life. So, what does the word appreciation mean? When your real estate appreciates, is that a good thing? Yeah. Unless you're buying. It takes a realtor to say that. Yes, appreciation is expansion. And so, next slide would be a wonderful picture of somebody basically with the title, Energy Flows Where Attention Goes. Is this science of mind? And not just science of mind, is it? It's a principle, law of attraction. Of course, you know, the last 20 years, more of this kind of information has been put out to, well, thanks to the internet and thanks for movies and different aspects of, you know, maybe popular best time seller books. We know that where your attention goes, the energy flows. But I go back to the question, where are you spending most of your time in your thoughts? And then there is, of course, contrast. Meaning, as things aren't going your way, or you recognize you don't have enough time or money, what does that do? Abraham Hicks would say it launches rocket of desire. So is it good to have contrast in your life? Do you believe that? When you're seeing it? When it's in your life? Are you feeling that? Now the question is, how long do you stay in that rocket of desire? Now, I'm going to do a little something with you. So let's have you close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Get yourself centered. Put your mind in your heart. And spend a moment or two here appreciating the relationships and pets in your life. Spend a few moments appreciating where you live. Spend a few minutes appreciating perhaps your job, your hobby, or whatever your unique creative self-expression brings to your world. Spend a few minutes, moments, appreciating your freedom. The number of choices that you have. Give that all a really big hug. And bring yourself back into the room. How does that feel? Expanding. Warm and fuzzy. I want to know if that's where the news tends to leave you. And so the spiritual practice that we just did there in the appreciation, when I asked about when things aren't quite going your way or you don't feel like you have enough, where you spend your time and your thinking there, you always want to end those thoughts on a higher note. On a higher note. Another scenario. You stub your toe. How much time do you spend reacting to that? It's immediate, and it needs your attention. How long does that story last compared to the emotional stories you tell? It goes silent. Would there be balance? In other words, do you spend time in your thoughts with the emotional stories of what has happened to you versus where the attention goes, the energy flows, hence looking towards what you know in the oneness that you are? What tends to happen in our story is we start identifying who we are with the story. But we are not the story. And we have to remind ourselves of who we truly are, which in that oneness, as we discussed earlier, is unlimited possibilities. So where does your mind tend to spend time? Wherever that is, there is always the opportunity to step into a higher awareness, a higher consciousness. Your circumstances do not define who you are. And based on whatever you are facing, that's one of the first things I always say to myself when I'm realizing I'm in a thought where I'm trying to solve something that doesn't quite feel good. It's reminding myself that this is not defining who I am. Although I can use that to lift my consciousness and ascend, ascension consciousness, to a higher place. Now, unfortunately, what you don't get to see right now is an elephant sitting on somebody in a cartoon. Ever feel like anything hits you like that, right here in the gut? Maybe it's grief. Maybe it's a job loss. Maybe it's a lack of funds for the month. Something may be hitting you in the gut. And where do you go with your consciousness? Now, I'm not saying don't feel what's happening there. But ascension consciousness would, it's sort of funny because the first thing I think when certain things happen is breathe. And then I looked at the picture with the elephant and I go, well, that might be a little difficult. But what do you tell yourself about that situation? And sometimes our choices lead us down. Now you would see a picture of an alley that's a dead end with a bunch of graffiti in it. Which means people have spent time in that alley because it's very beautiful graffiti. And sometimes when I'm counseling or doing a practitioner session, as we're speaking about different choices, it's like, oh, but I like that, so that's why I chose this, and then I like that, and that's why I chose this, and then, yeah, now I'm at this dead end. And then you start asking questions about the choices, and it's like, oh, no, I'm not giving up that choice because that's my comfortable choice, and that's what I want. But I would ask the question, the bigger question. if the energy is not flowing or expanding, where's your thought? At the dead end of that alley. And that may require moving yourself to a higher consciousness. And now you would see a picture of a solar system with the word God in it. Because we tend to make one choice, then the next choice, then the next choice, and then we end up in this, I'm stuck at a dead end. The energy is not moving, and yet I'm focused on the dead end. Now, several months ago, I know I showed a video of where the video started out in the universe and continued to get closer to the globe and then to a continent and then into a city and then all the way down into the microcosms. There are many dimensions, not just in our thought. We talk about 3D because, well, that's what we all grew up with and what people told us. But there are other dimensions, and you wouldn't be here if you didn't believe in another dimension, right? Right? And you've probably seen that or experienced that because it tends to be the place where we get to practice our faith. So I go back to the picture of an elephant sitting on you. And you know, God doesn't know the difference between big and small. Who makes that up? Yeah, we do. How big is this issue in front of me? How small is it to God? Oh, that's right, I'm one with God. Now, as a child, who was your authority? Your parents. And then, you know, if you had grandparents, aunts and uncles, etc., adults are essentially your authority. And that makes sense because as children, learning to live in the world. When do you become an adult? I love it. Everybody just laughed. Of course, I love it because when you're a kid, you can't wait to be 18. Then you can't wait to be 21. Oh, then you can't wait to get married, maybe have kids. And then there's this big gap, like you can't wait to retire. What's with that? So when do you become an adult? It's like the drip method, right? In other words, each experience that you move into continues to expose you, whether you're 18, 21, 25, 50. You may still be in certain areas becoming the adult. What does that mean? What does that mean?
Taking responsibility for yourself.
Yes, taking charge. And I'm going to say then, responding to that, that leadership in your own life, and we don't necessarily teach that in school, do we? So, yes, there are things that are happening in the world that we may not agree with. And it's really easy to sit in a chair and just react to the news. Where is that putting you? Victim. Hostage. Hostage to wherever that sea of energy wants to take you. And where does the energy flow? Intention. Now, I'm not saying we ignore what's going on in the world. And I'm going to hopefully show a video perhaps. But the important thing is that, you know, what is it that finally, I'll say, inspires us to take leadership in our life? And that when we're in a certain circumstance, again, you know, financial, relationship, job, that we aren't looking to rise our consciousness and ascend to a bigger perspective, a bigger view, and know our truth. Instead, we start identifying with that particular circumstance, forgetting who we truly are. So how can you choose to be a victor in your life?
Turn off the news.
Either that, or if you want to watch the news, because I know for myself it's like I don't want to stick my head entirely in the ground. But we just did a spiritual practice about expanding your appreciation. It's how you end with that thought, right?
And then watch the Late Show.
And laugh. I like that, Emmett, because if you watch the Late Show and laugh, you get a little levity out of that. That's very. That's another form of ascension, to laugh at ourselves. You know, we can all start looking for the good. I go back to what's the contrast? Perhaps, and I'm just saying perhaps, we have taken too much for granted, whether it's the freedom we have in this country or what we stand for, or, you know, whatever other circumstances you may be looking at, right? And when you see that contrast, when you feel something in your gut, yes, it is saying that something is not in alignment. But then it's taking the leadership to align yourself and not let yourself stay in that space of victimhood and moving yourself into leadership, knowing your higher power. You can't see this beautiful picture I have here, although I will post the slides, that says, "Rise up in consciousness and ascend." We know in science of mind where your power is. Where's your power? In your beliefs. And if you're practicing the principles and the philosophy here, then that will lead you back to a space of not just surviving, not just being comfortable, but thriving. I have to say, when I entered the doors here, I remember when people used to say, "How you doing, Kathy?" I used to say, "I'm surviving." Guess what? I was surviving in my relationship, surviving financially. That's not what I wanted. But that meant realigning with a different thought. And that meant spending your time and your energy knowing there's a contrast. Yes, you stubbed your toe. Yes, something just dealt you a blow in your stomach. But then does that draw you into your spiritual practice, or does that draw you into mind chatter? Rise above the storm and you will find the sunshine. Anybody ever been on an airplane above the clouds? If you need a visual after something's hit you in the gut, use the visuals. The next picture is of a butterfly, and it says, "Within you is the power to rise above any situation or struggle and transform into the brightest, strongest version of you." Anybody know what happens if you take a butterfly out of its chrysalis early? They die. And they never get to exercise their wings to grow the muscle that when they're out of the chrysalis, they can fly. How about you? Sometimes you're dealt things like, why me? Why this? I get to practice my spiritual muscle. The next picture is of Einstein. And you've all seen this one. You cannot solve a problem from the same consciousness that created it. You must learn to see the world anew. So for me, it's always like, what is it about this particular situation that I'm dealing with that I need to see something different? Do I need to get back to that perspective of maybe going out to the solar system and coming back in? You know, financially, your credit score doesn't define you. Who you are uniquely, somebody tell you what you should and shouldn't do. You are the power. You are not defined, even though society has all these little, think about how much construction we have that's all in our mind. Like you get in your car, all the rules of the road are stuff that we made up that's all in our heads that we're supposed to know. Taking yourself outside the constructs of what you see and putting yourself into the space, again, in a consciousness that is beyond the third dimension. A consciousness that is vitally important to the power of your beliefs, of standing behind your beliefs. Weather comes and goes. We don't seem to get attached to it. But experiences come and go, and we seem to get attached to them, don't we? So, with Einstein, you must learn to see the world anew. This is what our form of affirmative prayer, spiritual mind treatment. Step 1, remember who you are. I am one with it all. And John, I liked your contemplation this morning out of the Mark Nepo book that talked about that the black part of your eye is really a hole where you see the rest of the world. I like that for a lot of different things here. And in step 1, it may be literally that black hole going back out to the bigger picture of remembering who am I? And then unifying with that higher power. And again, this takes practice for us the minute that something happens to us to be able to go, oh yeah, I know where to go. So, Eckhart Tolle says, thinking and consciousness are not synonymous. Thinking is only a small aspect of consciousness. Thought cannot exist without consciousness, but consciousness does not need thought. I'm going to say that again a little slower because we talk about changing our thinking. But of course, a lot of positive thought isn't going to help if you are not aligned with that thought. So, again, thinking and consciousness are not synonymous. Thinking is only a small aspect of consciousness. Thought cannot exist without consciousness. But consciousness does not need thought. Now, this is where I was going to show you a video, but I'm not going to do that now based on respecting people's time. However, I will put into the e-blast a link to a video with Eckhart Tolle and Marianne Williamson. And it takes Eckhart, I recognized for myself, again, this was watching Eckhart speak and watching myself get impatient. And then saying to myself, wait a minute, why am I impatient? And so when you watch it, Eckhart, the question is, actually I have that listed here, good or bad, an illusion created by the mind. And so a gentleman actually asked a question at the beginning of the video. And while Eckhart is answering that question, I realized I am not deeply listening because I'm like, get to the point. So, I rewound it and I said, I have nowhere to be. I'm sitting here watching the video and I'm listening and I'm watching more deeply Eckhart speak. And if you've ever seen him, you know what I'm talking about. He is connecting with consciousness. And he doesn't use a lot of extra words because he's taking the time to culminate from his knowing the consciousness deeper within him and then expressing that. And I have to say that's really important in these times today, because it's really easy to react, is it not? Are we not all feeling that? Whether it's to each other, whether it's to the particular situation. And of course, I always frustrate myself saying, so what can I do about this, thinking that I have to immediately do. I'm skipping the first step. And the video gets very clear that if you're reacting with anger or reacting, you're really just continuing to feed and escalate what already is. Does that make sense? Yes. Because it's just bouncing with the same energy. And that means for all of us, leadership for the Center for Spiritual Living, Chico, leadership is first ascending our consciousness, knowing the greater good, the greater power, and being in that consciousness before either responding with communication or choosing an intention and following up with that intention. Because where energy goes, where thought goes, intention goes, energy flows. But we first have to be grounded in understanding that consciousness. Yes, simple but not easy. So another wonderful little picture to wrap up. Let's see, I have to think about you looking at me this way. Okay, so this is the past, this is the present, and this is the future. Where's my body? Always in the present. My body can't get into the past or get into the future as much as we might like to stop the aging process. Being in the present, that's part of the reason why in meditation we focus on our breath. Because it focuses you to be in the present without all that mind chatter that tends to either be reacting to the past or fear and worry of the future. The next picture was a picture of a compass. Where are you? Do you know where you are? At the center. The center of a consciousness arising. Ascension consciousness is for all of us to support each other in knowing that greater truth and expressing that greater truth individually and as a community. Now I'm going to end that with metaphysically, eggs are just a big seed, right? So plant a seed of consciousness. Take one and pass it on. And then if you don't want the plastic egg, leave it here because we're going to use it next Sunday. And that ends my lesson. Namaste.